Hey, welcome back. I've attended a number of these encampments supporting Hamas, and I think it's accurate to say many of them outright support Hamas. Others would say no, they're merely pro Palestinian. I think it's fair to say that all of them are anti Israel. There's gradations, and different people have their different reasons for being there. But one of the things that has struck me, and I saw this when I was at Columbia during their encampment, is I was surprised how many young women are in these battlements. And one particular observation was young Asian women. And yeah, I've been to enough of these encampments now in different cities where it seems to be a trend. And I can understand if someone is of Middle Eastern heritage, there's a tribal instinct, you stand with your clan. And I can understand if people come from a radical background, but in my mind, young women, and especially young Asian women, to stereotype, are peaceful, compliant, rule-following, scholarly, merit-oriented people who go to school to learn, go to school to better themselves. Often they're children of first-generation immigrants who work hard and save up to send their kids to get a medical degree. Why are so many young women a part of these radical protests? Well, someone who's been thinking about this question a lot is our guest today. Her name is Heather McDonald. She is the Thomas W. Smith Fellow at the Manhattan Institute. She's a contributing editor at City Journal, and she is author of When Race Trumps Merit. And I wonder if that question will answer some of these questions. Heather McDonald joins me now via Skype. Heather, help me understand. Maybe it's just me and my stereotypes and prejudices, but I did not expect to see so many young women, especially young Asian women, manning the battlements for Hamas.
Well, there's two issues here, Ezra. There's the Asian part and then there's the female part. I think they both have somewhat different explanations. It is astounding that Asians are at all attracted to left-wing causes because the left wing hates Asians. The left wing says they are this terrible wannabe model minority, and all of the democratic left-wing policies like racial preferences are working in the exact opposite of Asian interests. Asians are successful academically, but they are being kept out of universities disproportionately to their qualifications in order to make room for far less qualified so-called underrepresented minorities, which is code for Blacks and Hispanics. But nevertheless, you have a very large percentage of the Asian population in this country identifying with Democrats and with the left because that is the path towards elite status. The elites dominate our most high status professions, whether it's in tech or medicine or the media. And so if you want to credentialize your children for admission to Harvard and whatnot, you're better off identifying as a Democrat. So that explains that. But the other part of the Venn diagram here is the female component. And that is partly the fact that females simply dominate more and more in universities, which explains why universities have become hostile to free speech and academic inquiry without any inhibitions from claims of safetyism and this idea makes me feel unsafe. The more that the females dominate a university, the less it is dedicated to its core function of the uninhibited pursuit of knowledge. Females gave us trigger warnings, they gave us safe spaces, they gave us the therapy dogs, and females in general on average, and there's obviously exceptions, are less prone to weigh costs and benefits, to follow rational policies. And I would argue that the great mass hysteria that we've seen on behalf of Hamas, and I'm going to be much more blunt about this than you are, Ezra, I think this is a movement founded in utter ignorance. It is a mass cult. It is a social contagion. These students know nothing about the Middle East. It is based on ignorance and following the most irrational instincts, because look at these intersectional coalitions. I was at Columbia too, Ezra. You probably saw this. One of the signs was fags for Palestine, i.e., a variant on the various queers for Palestine combinations we've seen at these protests. That in itself discredits this entire movement, because as we know, as has been said endlessly on conservative media, you try holding a gay pride march in Gaza or in Somalia or in Nairobi, you're going to get thrown off of buildings. You have Muslim countries that have death penalties for homosexuals. This is a movement founded in irrationality. Females dominate the growing irrational strain on our campuses. They dominate the various left-wing majors, the ethnic studies, the women's studies, the gender studies, the anti-white studies. So really, this whole thing is a match made in heaven.
Wow. You said so many things there. One of the things you said is, safetyism, is a feminine idea. That's why I find it odd when you have women, young women, siding with the violent revolutionary. I mean, you would think that would be terrifying. And also, I mean, maybe again, I'm engaging in stereotypes here, but I just find it so hard to believe that a young woman would throw away $100,000 of her parents' cash and tuition to throw her lot in with these would-be Che Guevaras. Is it, a theory that my friend Gavin McInnes, who's a bit of a wild man, says is that maybe these young Asian women are rebelling against their tiger moms and saying, I just find it a strange demographic. I get some of the Queers for Palestine stuff because that's tear down the Western patriarchy. And if Hamas will tear them down from the outside, we'll tear them down from the inside. The issue is never the issue. The revolution is the issue. So I actually totally understand Queers for Palestine. All they know is that Hamas hates America, and so do they. That's why I don't get it when a polite, normal, healthy, happy, Korean Canadian kid says, I'm with Hamas. Since when are you in the tear down America business? That's what I don't quite get.
Well, I think that, and I think you're absolutely right that this is ultimately, and I think a lot of the sort of Jewish advocates in Congress don't get this. It's a mistake to characterize this hysteria as predominantly traditional anti-Semitism. It's not. It has very little to do with traditional anti-Semitism, with the exception of the Muslims on campus, and let's be honest, Blacks also have a long history of fairly traditional anti-Semitism, of hatred for the Jewish landlords, hatred for the Jewish shopkeepers. We saw recently, in the last couple of months, a Black student organization sent out on social media an extremely traditional caricature of Jewish power. But by and large, this is not motivated by the genteel wasp anti-Semitism of, well, Jews are just not clubbable. It's motivated by hatred of the West itself, of which Israel is now seen as the embodiment. This grows out of the current academic context. It's what's being taught across the board. It's very hard to find a humanities course today that does not take an extremely cynical, critical approach towards the greatest monuments of Western civilization, an approach, I have to add, that is completely fallacious. The West has nothing to apologize for. It is the beacon of tolerance and rights the world over. It has done nothing that is at all worse than what every other culture has done as far as genocide, expropriation, trying to wipe out your enemies. But so that's absolutely right. You're absolutely right to say that the queers simply say the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Of course, it's not a reciprocal sensation. The Palestinians are not saying, well, the enemy of my enemy, which is the queers, are my friends. This is not a transitive operation. But to get back to the Asians, what you see is sort of the docile would-be medical students. It is just the lure on campus. It is the lure of the oppositional, and it is the lure in our culture to be affiliated with causes that are seen as anti-establishment. It's an ironic impulse because the establishment today is the left.
Yeah.
We just heard this from President Biden in his appalling commencement speech at Morehouse College, where he was reiterating the usual lies that he ran with to get into the White House and that he's kept going since being in the White House, which is that this is a white supremacist country, that whites are mowing down blacks, that you have to be 100 times better if you're black to get a qualified position. It's just the opposite. Blacks get racial preference all the time. But that is the face of the Democratic Party. Biden goes around saying we have this permanent stain in the white soul of racism and hatred. That's all lies, but that is the Democratic Party. And a lot of these students are simply conforming themselves to the status quo.